Okay, so let's try something new here. I am going to record having my face on the side and show you a presentation. So today we're going to talk about composition, and I know it's a beginner's class, but I'm going to give you first an overview of different ways to look at composition, and then we're going to go through examples, and finally to the tips, the secrets to make it work even as a beginner. So an introduction to composition in art. First, I'd like to talk to you about all of those possibilities. So when you study composition, you're going to look at the unity of your piece, how everything comes together. You're going to look at balance to see if an element is stronger than another and how it relates to the whole piece itself. We're going to talk about movement. You're going to see rhythm. Yes, there is rhythm on simple two-dimensional piece. We're going to talk about focus, what is the main part of your composition. We're going to talk about contrast. We're going to talk about patterns and proportion. There's the list goes on, but we'll try to keep it simple. First of all, there are some very basic compositions that I'd like you to try to keep in mind, just because, it makes it easier when you feel like a little bit unease and you're not sure how to start something. You can always relate to those and start from something like this. So basic composition is a pyramid or a triangle. And as you can see here on the screen, we have, the little triangle and a couple of examples on how it can be done. So for instance, you see the tree. It has the triangular shape, and then you see you can use elements to create a pyramid without having one element with a pyramid shape. You have the cross that goes for the cross as well. You know how you use the horizon and elements to create a cross. There is the radiant line. Basically, you will have an element and several lines. Doesn't matter, how they're done, or if they're done by objects or by color or whatever, but they all point to one focal point. Then you have an L or a rectangular, and that's very basic composition as well and very effective. So you will have one element kind of towards the corner of your piece with another, horizon or something to give that L shape. Then you have the O or circular, and it can be very explicit, in the little drawing sketch that I did, it's kind of like a lake. Or again, it can be a combination of several elements creating a circular shape. The S or compound curve is a very common used composition as well, and you'll find that very often when you're seeing a road or a lake, I do that on my marshes a lot. This one is, not as explicit, but you can see what I mean, right? So that's a very easy to use shape, and it is effective. Then you have the diagonal line, which again, it can be done by, a mass, like a big element, or it can be done by several elements coming together on a diagonal on your composition. You have the 3 spots, and let's bring up why 3 and not 2. 2 objects will create the idea of opposition. So it doesn't cause harmony. People feel a little bit uneasy. They don't like seeing 2 elements that kind of are fighting with each other. But when you have 3 or any numbers, they're not odds, odds not even, right? Yeah. So that makes it more harmonic. And now the final tip on, those basic concepts are maximize overlap. So if you have elements floating, it kind of people don't see the piece coming together, So you kind of like, if you put something, you have, instead of having your elements kind of like floating like this, you put something in front of each other, slightly overlapping, and it creates a better, more comfortable to look at, more pleasing composition. And avoid tangents at all costs. You know, like if you have something like slightly pointing and touching, you don't just touch, you make a decision and you make it cross. You don't just have it touching in the corner, because that feels really uncomfortable. It's kind of like you don't really know what's happening. Is it meant to be in front, behind? It's just like it doesn't create harmony. Now the golden proportions. This is also very well talked about, and we're gonna go like quickly with some examples of how golden proportions were used in history, through history in art and architecture as well. And you'll see we'll all come around back to the rule of thirds. But I just wanted to see some examples, because some artists really go mad about, you know, getting like that done perfectly. So let's look at the examples. This is Degas, and you know, you see a very strong case study where he really looked on those lines. He looked into working with the triangular shapes, and the canvas is divided on golden ratios. So it's very, it's a famous piece, and it's famous for that reason. This one, the Hokusai Big Wave, it's a very famous piece as well. And you can see that it uses the golden ratio, you know, as the wave, and it's not even, it doesn't have to be with the canvas itself. It kind of like it's tilted, but it's still a perfect harmonic golden proportion. And I do have a full class on golden ratio. I'm not going to get into this now. I just wanted to see how people do use that in their compositions. You know, and many other studies will show you, you know, the Mona Lisa, for instance, Da Vinci was mad about planning. So you see that in the Mona Lisa, and you see where he comes from, you know, like all his sketches are very, very well studied. Then you have, you know, Dali. You have Seurat. He was mad on those things, like everything's perfectly arranged in his canvases. It all fits in the golden proportion. So all of his canvas, you can look at it and they're perfectly proportioned into golden ratio. Then a few examples of architecture, just so you see that it has been widely explored in several areas. And even in design, nowadays you will find like the most famous logos are all in harmony with golden ratio. But anyway, let's talk about other ideas, and these ideas might be easier to relate to, so I wanted to share with you. First of them, simplicity. When less is more. So this is a picture I took another day here when the sun was rising, and you see there's hardly anything in the picture, but it is nice because it's simple, and people like simple. People like, you know, it's comforting. It's just, there's not enough in there to create stress. And I'm going to go through a lot of examples of my work because, you know, copyright reasons, we don't want to be using other people's stuff. But a lot of people really enjoy white. So white's a very strong color. You have to use with caution. People forget the white is a color, but it's, you know, the most effective color. So anyway, just a simple object surrounded by white. You see that in a watercolor example as well. So, you know, it's, the focus is very clear and it's very smooth. This, you know, my latest toy is a drone, and I really love taking pictures with drones. And in this composition, you basically have like two colors with a slight transition in the middle, but it would make a very nice like big panel. So that's another case of simplicity as pleasing. Or you can be simple as choice of colors and subject. So this one, even though it has a lot more information, it's all blue with some black and white. So there's nothing conflicting here. And it's a very well commented piece. People love this for some reason. And I would say that that reason is because it's simple. Now let's talk about lines. Lines are a very effective way to enhance the drama and tell a story. When we're doing a painting, we're also telling a story. And sometimes we forget about that, but it is storytelling. So in this canvas here, we have the like a very exaggerated horizontal positioning. So what is going on here is because of all that shade of the tree, it kind of like invites the observer to walk towards the tree. So you start looking, like your eyes will travel around the canvas, following the shapes and the lines that are created by the shadow until it reaches the tree, and that's where it blossoms. This one, the lines are very strong as well, and you can notice like a very strong triangular shape. In this case, what is most interesting about the use of line is how it invites the observer to walk across the bridge. So you start like looking at this canvas, and you will notice that first you go around the right, looking through, you know, like following the path, and then you see the lights on the top, and you will circle around, you know, the water and back to the center. In this case, it's you have like vertical lines with crossing, you know, it is a good rule of thirds with cross, you know, composition. So in here, the lines invite you to look at the pelican in the foreground, and then slowly it guides you through discovering what's happening towards the back, and then you finally realize there are many birds and, you know, besides the boats. Now, shapes. The shapes also are another way of storytelling, and it's very important to get your composition in harmony by the use of shapes. So in this case, we have the Empire State Building in the back, and we have the flag at the front, and, you know, other buildings kind of like coming around. It shows a lot of the hectic New York City, and, you know, the lines are very sharp and strong, and it reflects that feeling. Now, in this case, it goes back to the idea that the lines are guiding you through, like in that other painting with the bridge going across at night. In this case, instead of having like a very strong line going to the side, you have elements, and that's why we're talking about shapes. You have the lake in the middle, you have the buildings in the back, and you have the path with the green. So it's all elements and the shapes, and you can see like I've used a lot of foreground and background. So you kind of like, you create your own story, you try to figure out like what's happening there, who was the person looking at the city, you know, like it just invites you to have a conversation. Framing. We're not talking about framing as framing. We're talking about framing as an element on your composition. And for this piece, you know, you can see in the background is one of my most famous pieces. And I use the tree branches to create a frame and put the focus there. But, you know, you surround your subject with a framing shape. Here, there are several examples on how you can do it. If you look at the top left, the idea is to put the focus on the red bridge, and it's framed by the tree branches in one side and the big leaf on the other side. And then underneath, you have like an actual real like framework where you're looking through a window. That's a very common way to use a frame. Like if you're looking through a window, through a door, and it's very well used in photography. Now, in the middle, you have, it's a New York City scene. You have the Empire State Building in the middle, like tiny in the middle, but that, even though it's small, it becomes the focal point because you have all the buildings on the side and this big tree framing. So you end up looking right in the middle to the Empire State Building. The one on the top right, the jaguar, is framed by the branches. So it creates like the framing feel, and it embraces the main focal point. The one underneath, same thing, using leaves. So you have like those big leaves around the center figure. Now, symmetry and pattern. So you can use symmetry, you can use patterns, and you can create amazing pieces with those. They are definitely on the busier side of composition, but people do like symmetry and pattern, so you can sure explore that. 1 second. So this one is a very symmetric piece, as you know, the eagle is perfectly centered and the wings are spread, you know, as perfect harmony in that symmetry. However, the background is a pattern. It's not symmetry in that sense, but it also creates a pattern which is quite pleasing. Here you have symmetry again, and the symmetry on the first one on the left is from reflection. So you have the sky reflecting on the water. And on the one on the side, it's a bridge, and you're going right through the bridge, so the symmetry is on the sides. Now, back to the rule of thirds, which is a favorite. You know, it works either if you're a professional or an amateur, and it is the easiest solution. So I want you to pay attention to this one. Here, if you see the Morris Island Lighthouse, it is on a third of the canvas, and that creates a balance. So you have an interesting rule of third application here. Then you have, like, if you look at the toucan, it's off center, and the side of the toucan kind of like goes in a third of the canvas, and then the branch underneath is another third, you know, from the horizon. Same thing with the flag on the top. You can notice, if you're looking at the composition, they are exactly the same. The only thing that changes are the objects in it. So, composition for dummies, the one most valuable cheat trick. You don't have to remember anything else. In fact, I don't want you to pay attention to anything else as a beginner. I want you to focus on rule of thirds. All you have to do is divide your canvas in 3. So you put the 2 lines horizontal and 2 lines vertical, and then you get the crossing points. How do you implement the rule of thirds? You have the intersection, those 4 major intersection points, and that's where you're going to put your object. Then you have the option of axis. So you're going to put your object going across those intersections. It can be a line instead of being an object. It can be like, it's very easy to see that if you're painting a tree or, you know, like a building or something, then it's really like a strong line because it crosses one edge to the other. And as well, you know, horizon as well as vertical. Filled columns, so you can divide your canvas into thirds, and you can use, like, for instance, a strong color in one side, a strong color in the other side, or it can be objects. But anyway, like, you're going to fill your canvas by using the columns. And I painted them pink just so it's very easy for you to see how to apply it. Same rule goes for the rows. So you can use it as column or as rows, and diagonals as well. So you divide your canvas and use diagonals. And what I want you to remember is, don't try to be perfect. Go with what feels right. Because at the end of the day, the composition, like when you study composition, is simply to make it feels right. So if it feels right for you, you must be doing it right. That sounds silly, but anyway. So try to think about that. And I want you to exercise by getting your camera. So this time I'm not asking you to paint or sketch or anything. If you get your camera nowadays, I believe that most of you will have an iPhone, and you can see that there's the lines I don't know if you can see it there, but anyway, you go on preferences, settings, and then you check to show grid on your camera. So when you're taking a picture, you're actually going to see the grid with the lines. And I want you to explore taking pictures by using that. Let me stop this sharing the screen. Okay. So that's the composition basics for you guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. There is so much to explore if you actually want to get, you know, diving deep into it. And I plan on putting a golden ratio class together. I used to teach that 10 years ago back in Brazil, and it was fun because you can see how it is pleasing because it comes from nature. So you can see that in nature, and that's why it's something that everyone loves. But anyway, this is what I had to show you today. And do send me your exercises, you know, take pictures and send them my way. Show me that you got what it means to use the rule of thirds. And if you didn't get it by any chance, write to me and I'll get back to you with some more examples or some other way of explaining, just so that you can understand. Thank you very much. And I truly appreciate you being here.